Hey friends, welcome back to Healedish, a space for the wild, unfiltered stories that don't always get told, and the real, imperfect process of the healing that follows. I am so excited about today's guest as I actually came across her on TikTok and her story immediately resonated with me. I knew right away that I had to invite her to be on the show. If you have been following me for a while, you know how I often share stories of grooming and spiritual abuse, especially stories involving youth pastors. And while the man in her story wasn't her youth pastor, he was her choir teacher, he was somebody in a position of trust and authority. And just like so many survivor stories that we have heard, the power dynamics were the same. I'm so grateful to have her here. So with all of that being said, let's dive in. All right. Well, welcome, Mary Beth. I'm so excited to have you on here. A little bit of backstory. I was scrolling through TikTok and I have a folder called potential guests. Like whenever I see crazy stories, I'm like, I have to reach out to these people. And immediately I reached out to you because you did this trend to, I forgot which Taylor Swift song it was that I found it on because you've done a few of them and you're such a Swiftie, right?
Big Swiftie, yes.
Big Swiftie. Yeah, and it was telling your story, and I knew I just wanted to have you on because it's so similar to a lot of these youth pastor stories that we have been telling. So do you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell us where this whole friendship, this kind of inappropriate friendship started?
So, I'm Mary Beth. I had a relationship with my choir director. After high school is when the relationship happened, but I can't tell you that story without starting, obviously, when he was my teacher. So the thing that's important to understand is that I went to a very small school. So there was one choir teacher for middle school through high school. So he taught me from 6th through 12th grade in his choir.
Oh, so was it one of those, was it a Christian school or just a normal school? Okay, so was it a school where it was middle school and high school combined?
Yeah, kind of, yes. It's in the same building. Yeah. And so we would just go over to the middle school when we were in high school. That's where the choir room was, one choir room. So I graduated with like 130 people, which I didn't think was like super small until my husband told me how many he graduated with. And I was like,
there was 900 in my... I went to a really big school, like MTV Made came one time.
Oh my God.
And
it was that show.
They came a few times actually, so it was a big school.
Wow. Yeah, ours was very small. And so I met him actually when I was in 5th grade because I auditioned for the high school musical. They were doing Annie, and so they did like a casting call. Yeah. So I got to play Duffy and Annie, and it was really, I write this in my book, which I didn't say. I wrote a book about this. But this, I can't tell the story without saying that I met him when I was 11, even though that meeting was there's nothing spectacular about it. I just met a teacher and I was 11. And I thought he was great, but I didn't really think much else.
How old was he at the time? So when you're 11, how old was he when you guys first met?
He would have been like 24, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's when, when I put it like that. Yeah. When I put it like that, you can like feel it like, oh, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. So in 6th grade, I took choir because we had to. And then I ended up not taking it 7th and 8th grade. I auditioned as an 8th grader for the high school show because they would allow us to audition to fill the ensemble. And I sang a camp rock song. I can't get that out.
Which one?
And it was why am I blanking on it now? Oh God.
Is it This Is Real, This Is Me?
Thank you. Yes, I can think of the name of it. Yes, that is the one.
I don't even know if that's the name, but it's iconic.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember that when I auditioned, he said to me, like, if you're going to be serious about music, then you need to be in my choir. And so I took it the next year, my freshman year.
Did you get in to that, the play?
Musical? Yes. Yeah, I did.
That's fun.
And I worked with him through that whole thing, and I don't really have any memories that stand out about him. Which, like, this is, when I look back on this time, I'm like, I think that's what this was supposed to be like what being in shows was supposed to be like, because I remember my friends, and I remember, those things. But my freshman year, I joined his choir. I got an invite from him to join his a cappella group. That was not, at the time, it was not auditioned. So I got to join that as a freshman. I was only one of two, which it's a small school, so it wasn't a huge group. But it's important to understand that this man was my teacher during the day, but he also was directing the music in the musicals that I was in. He was directing the a cappella group I was in. So I saw him like you would see a coach. So I saw him after school a lot as well as during the school day. So from here, this is when the grooming starts. And grooming is such a difficult thing to pinpoint, I think. And we can get into like how I discovered that this was grooming later, but
Absolutely.
just some highlights from my time as I would say freshman to junior year would be he would make fun of my boyfriends. Specifically my freshman year, I had a boyfriend that my peers would tease me about, and he joined in with them. And from the time that I was a freshman until way after I graduated, he always referred to this guy as Creeper. That's what he called him. He also...
Which this is so weird. I mean, obviously we can talk about it more as we go,
Yes.
but this idea of, because how old is he now? What, 27 or something like that? He has beef with a teenager.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, why do you have such strong feelings?
Yes.
I'm curious why you even care.
Yes. And so the context is that this boy was a senior and I was a freshman. And he straight up called this guy cradle robber, which now I'm like, that's real funny that you said that. And it was really really
projecting
uncomfortable.
Much. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And that was something I didn't even clock it until years into therapy when I was like finally unpacking this. But really all of my boyfriends, there was teasing involved. Other things that he would do that were like seemingly minor is there was definitely some favoritism, I think, that played out. And I know that my peers picked up on it because they would tease me if I got a solo or if I got something that I wanted. They would always be like, oh, well, why don't you guys just kiss already? And
oh my gosh, your peers would say that?
Yes.
So what do you think they were picking up on? Because, okay, so favoritism as far as he's giving you solos, but what were your interactions like? Like, do you think that your peers were viewing your interactions as flirty? Like, were you guys laughing a lot? Which obviously might feel innocent to you as at the time, because you're young and your mind is not thinking that.
Yeah. I truly, I think because we laughed a lot, I think that I was kind of like the one that he would tease. And I hate to say this and normalize it, but I feel like with male teachers, there's like usually a female student that you can pinpoint as being teased. And I don't say that to normalize it. It shouldn't be like that. But I would say I was that student. He also gave me private lessons after school. And
how did your parents feel about all of this? Because you're obviously seeing this guy so much because you're involved in a lot of these different programs, and then now he wants to tutor you after school. Was that something that you asked for, or he said, I want to give her private lessons, and what did they think?
It was suggested by him, and they just thought like, okay, if you want to take lessons, great, you can take lessons, and we know him. But that was my freshman year. After that, he did send me somewhere else for lessons. He said, if you want to grow as a musician, you need to be taught by someone other than me as well. So he only did the private lessons that one year. Now, I could talk a lot about freshman to junior year and a lot of little things that I kind of hash out in my books, but the part that really was a turning point was my senior year. So my senior year, he went through a divorce. We were very close at that point. I think when you spend that much time with someone, you start to recognize their moods and you pick up on their body language. And he definitely had that with me. And I had that with him too. And so I don't remember specifically when it happened. I've tried so hard to rack my brain, but at some point he told me about his divorce because his then wife was working at the school. And
so she was working at the school. And did you know about his marriage throughout your time knowing him? Did he talk about his wife much?
He didn't really talk about her a lot. Truly, he didn't talk about his personal life a lot really until this year. But I knew of her. She would come to our concerts. I knew about her, but I didn't know a whole lot. And really, she only started working at the school, must have been like the year before the divorce happened. And it was in a coaching position. So he told me about it, and he told me not to tell my peers because he wasn't ready to talk to them about it. And I see your face.
Ooh, no, yeah,
yes.
And we can get into it, but this we have a special bond that they don't have access to this side of me, but you have access to the side of me, and this needs to be a secret between us because I really trust you.
Yes. And that honestly, I think bred a closeness between us too, that I felt like I was special, I was trustworthy, and I needed to be there for him because he picked me to say this too. So clearly he saw something in me or like thought he needed me to know. He also, so I went to a church in town. It's important to note that this man did not live in my town. He worked there. He joined my church my senior year, and we sang together in the church worship team.
How did he find your church? And did he know that you were going there?
That is something I have tried to figure out. Yeah. I think he may have had some type of connection to that church prior, but it's important to note too that there are so many churches in my area. I live in the Midwest. There's a church on every corner. Like he could have gone anywhere. I do know he worked kind of with someone who was in the worship team with me, so that could have been a reason to go. And I will be the first to admit I've made excuses for this man all the time. And so I used to be like, well, he just wanted to go there. But now I know better, and I know that he should have had the boundary to not go there. If he knew that we were getting close, he knew if he had picked up on a crush from me at that point, because I did have a crush on him because I was a teenager, then if he had proper boundaries, he would not have gone to that church and he would not have joined.
Yeah. And I was even thinking that, I mean, I don't know the rules. I'm not a teacher or anything like that. So I'm not sure what's actually allowed and what's not allowed, but you would think that there would be some sort of rule that you are not supposed to be around students outside of school. I would think, but maybe because it's a church, that's kind of a gray area. What do you do about that?
Exactly. And it's a small town too. I will say I was a teacher for 5 years. I'm no longer a teacher, but I would go shop for groceries in the next town over because I didn't want to run into students or teachers. And so the behavior of like intentionally going to a place where you knew your students would be is weird to me. And I feel like it's something that is cautioned against, but I don't know that there's anything that you can, I don't know.
Like actually technically fireable about it. It's just kind of this gray area. So you're saying that at the time you were starting, when do you feel like you started to have a crush on him? Which is so natural, by the way. I feel like even all of the young teachers in my school, a lot of the girls had little crushes on them, even if they weren't even that attractive. I feel like just because they're near you, it's kind of like when you go on a plane and there's someone somewhat your age sitting next to you. It's just like, especially being young and growing up, you know?
Yes. And in a female dominated profession too, like even we would joke about it as teachers. Like if a man walked into our school, we'd all be like, is he hot or is he just the only guy in here? I don't know.
That's so real. Or are you the only option?
Yeah, exactly. So Yeah, I think that the crush started very early, like probably my freshman year, just because I thought he was attractive. He was talented. He was funny. And I kind of hashed this out in my book a lot too, but we were very similar. And he would tell me a lot, which this is probably the grooming, but he would tell me, you remind me a lot of myself when I was your age.
Yeah.
So I just I felt like we had this connection, but I will say the crush turned less like my peers probably around junior, senior year, and more into oh, I feel like I like this person.
Mm-hmm. And you actually know him. It's not just this bubble of, oh, it's somebody around. At this point, you feel like you have history, you have probably inside jokes, and now he's starting to confide about his divorce.
Yes.
So that breeds a lot of intimacy there.
Yes. And I cried to him about breakups. I used to tell people that he was my best friend in high school, which major red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But he would pull me into the teacher's lounge because I remember specifically I got a solo and a girl was mad about it and yelled at me about it in the hallway. And he pulled me into the teacher's lounge to tell me, I already talked to her about this. You deserved it. She needs to stop. You can't let people talk to you like that. They're just these moments that I always thought meant that he was a good teacher. And if what happened later didn't, maybe I would have gone on believing that forever. But obviously, the story takes a turn.
Yeah. Do you think the other teachers noticed? So he pulled you into the teacher's lounge. Do you think other teachers were kind of side-eyeing him? Because I feel like if I were a teacher and I saw this guy talking to this young girl all of the time, I would feel a way about that.
I wonder that all the time. I've thought about at times reaching out to my other teachers, or specifically my drama director who worked very closely with both of us, and just never have. So I'll never know because no one, to my knowledge, said anything. And I wish they had. And I would say to any teacher, if you notice stuff like that, say something, because it could be nothing, but it also could be a part of a bigger picture you're not seeing. So that's one of my big takeaways from this whole situation.
Yeah. So as he's starting to open up about his divorce, what ended up happening that senior year?
Yeah. So, I got a lot of his personal life details at church because I was the only youth in the worship band most of the time. Sometimes there would be another one. And he would share with these other adults what was happening. And I do remember the other adults being like, whoa, Mary Beth is here. And he would be like, no, she knows. It's fine. And that was
I feel like even the church knew, hey, boundaries, this is your student. And he's like, no, she already knows.
Yep.
I wish somebody had confronted him at your church.
Me
then.
too.
Yeah.
And the thing about these people, and the thing to note, and this is a thing to know about my parents too, is you never think that it's happening to you, or you never think that it could happen in this town or with this person that we trust. Or he was very charismatic, very likable person. And so I think everyone just kind of was like, oh, it's fine that he has poor boundaries. He's just a good guy.
Yeah. Or he's naive. He's just kind. I feel like people write off inappropriate behavior.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Actually, one of my friends, she just sent me a DM, and she was saying she was at ministry school and this man came up to her and was praying over her, and he started kissing her forehead as he was praying for her. She ended up going to the leadership and said, hey, he kissed my forehead. It was so inappropriate. It made me really uncomfortable. And they said, you're misinterpreting his father's heart for you. He has a fatherly love for you. It's just insane how much people write off inappropriate behavior as, well, they're just so kind. They're so nice. We shouldn't worry about it. It's it's a lot.
Yeah. And another memory that I have is driving to a state conference where I was sitting in the passenger seat next to him. This was hours from where we were, so it was a trip. And there were students in the back seat. It was my best friend at the time and two girls. And they started to make jokes when we would drive by signs where they would say the name of the sign and then say, "In my pants," and they would laugh. Yes. And I remember, like, he didn't stop it. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I guess he's not going to stop it. I'm not going to participate because I was like a goody girl. And then he started to participate in the game with us. And then the kicker is when we went to a food court for lunch, and we were saying the names of the stores, and he leaned over to me and he pointed at the store Pink, and he said, "I can't say this out loud."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So he was not even just tolerating it. He's actively participating in it, now creepily Correct. Whispering in your ear
Correct.
about it.
And another, like, I didn't remember this until recently because a friend read my book. My very best friend who's in the book read it. And he was like, "You totally forgot this one time when I said that I had a blanket fetish." Because I didn't realize what that word meant. I just thought it meant that
I was really like, how does one have a blanket fetish? I was like, okay, Mary Beth, let me know.
Exactly. I just thought it meant that I liked blankets a lot.
I was like, wow, I don't know this one.
Yeah.
I'm so innocent.
Nope. And so I said this, like, with my whole chest out loud in front of a group of people, and my teacher was there, and my best friend was like, "No, he leaned in and whispered to you, like, don't say that, this is what fetish means." And I was like, I remember that I was taught that in that moment and that I felt flaming embarrassment about it, but I didn't remember that he was the one that told me.
Yeah, he should not be explaining to you what the word fetish means.
No. And there are several of those in my book that he explained to me. That's
oh my gosh.
Not okay.
No, absolutely not.
And so to go back to senior year, he was in my church. I got all those personal details. I had to go to Disney World with his wife. She was coaching the color guard. So the band and choir went to Disney World, and she obviously went, and she was my chaperone, and I knew all of these things that my peers didn't know, and I hated the woman. And
so was he talking bad about his wife to you?
Yes.
That is so inappropriate. It makes me so mad.
Yes.
Wow.
And I became so defensive of him and so protective of him over the course of that time. That's what grooming will do. And that's honestly the hardest part for me to let go of. Even now, as I tell my story and I'm prepared to share it, I still find myself wanting to protect him. And if I could cut her out of this story, I would, if it could have nothing to do with her, because I don't know what happened in their marriage. I know what this man told me, and it's not fair to her, but I couldn't leave it out because it's such an egregious thing that he did, to share those intimate and personal details with me. Mm-hmm. So that was and he told me, senior year, a lot of things. He told me I was the most talented and best to come through his program. All kinds. Again, I would not say that to a student.
It's a lot of flattery.
Yes.
And then on top of that, mixed with the personal information that he's giving you.
Yes.
And going back to him painting his wife is absolutely terrible, and just how inappropriate that is. I mean, my ex, he did the same thing with his ex-girlfriend. He told me she's absolutely crazy. He had said that she had told him one time that you're such a coward and you're never going to amount to anything. And I had such a bone to pick with this girl, because I was like, who says that? That is the meanest thing. And in hindsight, I found out that he had attempted to assault her. So I mean, it's who knows? For all we know, maybe his wife wasn't great, but I would beg to, or I would be more apt to say that there's something going on his end, that he's painting it a certain way.
Yes. Which will become more clear too, even as we get further into the story.
Awesome.
So there is a story that I think is important to share about the week after I graduated from high school. He came to a wine tasting party at my parents' house. They hosted these often. Yes.
Was this through the church?
No.
How did he even find out about this? Just because he was in your circle?
My
through
parents
the church?
invited him because he kind of befriended my parents. It was a small town, small church. And also, my mom is a very dear and lovely woman who sees the best in people, and also I think felt bad for him and wanted to like give him a space or give him somewhere to come with people because she saw he was struggling. I get that from her because I clearly also did that. So yeah, they invited him to this party. And on that night, my little brother and I went to the Red Box. If you remember the Red Box, to get a movie.
Oh my gosh, deep memory.
Right? It was such a treat for us. And as I was getting my movie, some old man came up behind me and he was like, I'm going to come home and watch that with you, right? And it creeped me out. I went home and the first thing I did was I found my mom to tell her about this like weird interaction. And he was sitting next to my mom. And I said, Mom, this guy said this. And the words out of his mouth were, that's not weird. Of course he hit on you. You're beautiful. And I was 17 because I graduated at 17. My mom was sitting next to him. My mom, I think, tried to like laugh it off and move along. And he doubled down, turned to my mom and said, no, would it be weird if I, at however old he was, 31, was hitting on your daughter if she hadn't been my student? And I think I blacked out so hard in that moment because that, to me, at the time, at 17, was like, oh my God, this man actually likes me back, I think. Like,
well, yeah, it feels exciting if you've had feelings for him for such a long time. And I think I look back at, obviously we're all different. Some people are confident in high school. I was not. So if I had somebody who was attractive and who I have a crush on, be like, of course people are hitting on you.
Yeah.
You're so gorgeous. I mean, I would immediately butterflies and think, oh my gosh, is this not all in my head? Like,
yes,
does he actually like me? Yeah.
Because for years before, or not years, but really over the past year, like my best friend Maverick and I would be like, I think he likes me. Like, I think he likes me back. Like with all the little like just a ton of little things, we would say that. But then he said this and I was like, I think he might actually like me back. And we had I chatted with him a long time then, and he was pretty tipsy, and he ended up staying. He was the last one
at
to
the
leave.
wine thing. He's tipsy at your parents' house.
Yes.
So are you guys just like sitting on the couch as your parents or somewhere else? Because this is so weird.
And they had a little like wine cellar, so we were sitting at a table in their wine cellar amongst not just my parents but their friends. This is all adults at this party.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here talking to him. And we talked for a long time because I was going to college. We talked about college. We talked about my roommate at the time. Another super creepy thing that happened is I told him about my roommate that I had found. And I was like, she's so pretty. She's a runner. I'm so intimidated by her and I'm really scared. And he was like, well, let me see a picture. And so I pulled up, exactly. That's weird.
The ick that I feel from this man,
it
he
gets
bothers
worse.
me so much.
So I pull out my phone and I show him a picture and he says, oh, she looks old, don't you think?
Jaw on the floor. Oh
I know.
my gosh.
I know.
No, he likes younger girls.
Yes.
Wow.
And she was also 18. And this is like, I had to hash this out in my book because that's a moment I didn't really focus on at the time because I was too busy focusing on the fact that he said I was beautiful. But when I look back on it, I'm like, what a horrifying little nugget that he gave me in that moment when he said that about her. Because it just tells me what he was looking for.
Yeah, and I think that any sort of thing in your mind that maybe you could try to convince yourself that he's just like this innocent guy and he accidentally had feelings, that shows his intention that he's actively looking at young girls. Yes. And what an 18-year-old who looks her age or a little older is too old for him as a 30-something-year-old, which I feel like we can get into this more, but how old are you now?
29.
Yeah, I'm about to turn 31, and I cannot fathom being interested in somebody freshly out of high school. It's so sick. Ugh.
Yep. Exactly. Yes. So back to this party after this moment, I ended up going back upstairs. Everyone left except him. He, at some point my senior year, they had sold their house or wherever they were living, him and his ex-wife, and he had moved into a barn apartment of someone who lived down the street from me. So he said, I'm going to go to my barn apartment because it's right down the street and get this like aging bottle of special bourbon or whatever and share it with you guys to my parents. So it's just him and my parents. And they sat out on our wine patio drinking that bourbon for a while. He broke one of my dad's glasses. My dad tells this story to this day. And the next morning, what my dad has to say about the whole whatever happened out there is, and I quote, I think Will Davis is trying to be my son-in-law.
He said that at the time, or he says that now?
At the time.
So what was your dad thinking at that point?
I don't know, because that's kind of all he said. I have asked my parents about this as I started to unpack it. And I think my mom just did not want to believe that it was happening. And I know she feels so much guilt about it now. She has not even read my book. I think it's very hard for her. And I want them both to know that I don't fault them for this. None of this, I don't fault anyone but him. This is all his fault. But I think my dad is more of the learn your lessons the hard way type. It always has been. And his take on it has always been like, if I said anything, it wasn't going to help the situation for you.
Yeah. That's really hard. That's really hard. It's hard. I love my parents. I don't talk about my parents very much because there's things that have hurt me, you know.
Yeah.
But I adore them. I adore them, and I choose to not talk about it because I do love them. But I would obviously disagree with that sentiment. So yeah,
that's exactly how I feel. They're imperfect people, and they did not handle this perfectly, and maybe we can like use it as a lesson for, you know, what to do if you notice these things happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So did you see him often once he moved into the barn down your street?
No, not really. Just then, and then he hosted a senior barbecue every year. So anyone who graduated could come to his house and he would have a barbecue. And the whole thing about this was if you go, you can ask him anything that you've been wanting to ask him for 4 years, and he will tell you the answer truthfully. Exactly.
What an interesting thing to do.
I agree.
Wow. Why did he even come up with that? That's very strange.
For years, there would be like little things we would ask him, and he'd be like, you can ask me that at the senior queue. And we would hold on to that.
Mm-hmm. I actually feel like maybe I did have teachers who would say that, but they didn't actually schedule a time to like do it.
Like plan it. Yeah.
They'd be like, I'll answer that on the last day of school. Like if we were like, are you married? Are you whatever? And they would say, I'll answer that on the last day of school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this stuff was like, you know, these two teachers dating because they hang out a lot together. And he'd be like, you can ask me that at the senior queue.
This is not his job to spill the tea on other teachers. That's crazy.
Not okay. So I went to that. That was at his little barn thing. And one of the questions, interestingly, was, have you ever had a student that had a crush on you? And he told this elaborate story about a girl who had a crush on him, and he had to discourage her, and it was really uncomfortable. And I remember in my mind being like, oh my God, is he mad at me? Because like I've had a crush on him this whole time and he's never said anything. Mm-hmm. And that was another moment that I was like, maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm special. Yeah. So silly.
Well, it's silly that it should even be a question because he should be appropriate, but it's not silly for you to think that because he's giving you
You're right.
a million reasons to think that you are different than everybody else.
Yeah. So at that senior Q, actually, he announced that he had resigned from his position at our school that he had been at for like over 10 years at this point and was moving states, not to the state next door, like far away. And I remember just being so devastated. I was like, I'll never see you again. I was so upset. And I have a letter that I wrote him after this that I have since discovered. And I just put the whole thing in my book because I was like, this is important that you know where this little 17-year-old girl was. But we did stay in contact, obviously. And this is kind of where we get the turn in the story. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Through what means did you keep in contact? So was this like Facebook or did you have his phone number?
Both. Sometimes Facebook messages, but primarily I had his phone number. I had it for years because of music stuff.
Which I'm like,
exactly.
I don't think that.
No, don't love that.
Good anyway. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah, I had his number. And I hate admitting this because I feel like I was like this kid that was just so obsessed with him, but I would have these dreams about him. And I thought the only cure was to reach out and find out how he was doing. And freshman year is when I really like got involved with a very evangelical church on campus. And so I thought this was God telling me to check on him because he wasn't okay. Yeah.
Which, it's funny because when I saw your video, I had no idea that there was any sort of religious aspect to your story at all. But hey, that fits perfectly with this podcast because I think it's so easy to over spiritualize everything. I know I did. I had made a prayer to God that I would meet my husband. And then 1 year later, I was marrying my ex. So then that was not on purpose. So the whole time I was like, well, God answered my prayer. I can't leave this marriage. And I think one of the hardest things to unpack is realizing that coincidences or things just happen. So if he's on your mind, you might be having dreams about him, but that doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit is telling you that you have to reach out to him. But I mean, you're constantly being filled with these ideas of the fantastical sides of living. So if you're having a dream, maybe it's a prophetic dream or, that's really hard.
Yeah. So, and I leaned so hard. I would pray for this man like all the time that he would find a church because that's what I was told would help him because I knew he was struggling.
Was he a Christian?
Away.
Oh, wait, he did go to your church. So he must have been.
To my church.
Okay.
But, I think you might understand this better than most. We went to church. It was a hobby. It was a thing that we did. When I joined that church in college, that was my life. Everything I did, I breathed that. And I thought if you didn't do that, you hadn't found Christ. If you weren't like living every single moment of your life thinking about how it's relating to Jesus, then you don't know Jesus.
Yeah. Unless you're sold out for God, because you don't want to be lukewarm. I mean, everything needs to be about this. And I feel like my parents were like that. We were raised non-denominational and we went to youth group and stuff, but it did not get to the level that I ended up in until college or until I joined this ministry school. And it was total culty vibes. And I think that you had also said that it felt culty, right?
Yes. I have a group the church was called, I don't know if I should drop the name of the church. It's a campus church. It's on a lot of churches. I can't because I'll just say it. It's fine. Yeah. It's on tons of campuses. It's called H2O because it's a living water church, whatever. There's a group of us who have just like found each other that went to that church, and we have a group chat and we call it H2No. And
I'm obsessed. I love dark humor. I feel like that's how you heal through
exactly.
like, what did we even go through? That was so crazy.
Exactly. And it's just this spot where we like are like, hey, do you remember that time that X? And then we all are like, oh my God, we were in a cult. But really like that church very much had cult vibes. And a lot of like, I've since read up on cults. A lot of those tactics very similar to the things that we were being taught. So, you know,
I believe it.
Was not healthy.
I believe it was a cult. I believe you.
Good. Yeah. So I was texting him every time I had these dreams. It's also important to know that within this church, we were being taught as women to find a man to lead us, lead our family, a man who prays for you is someone that you want to be with, someone who sends you scripture and wants to talk about it with you. That's someone you want to be with. So during this time, that's what I am seeking, and I'm praying about it. I have, other boyfriends that I have at the time. I have a boy who tells me that I'm not filled with the Holy Spirit because I haven't spoken in tongues yet, which when I heard you talking about that on your podcast, I was like, I thought about it. I thought about it for a second. I was like, I like this guy a lot. But I never quite got there with him.
No, they were like, you haven't been baptized in the Holy Spirit if you're not speaking in tongues. Yeah. Yep. And it's such a shame thing. And you're like, okay. And I know at least at my church, and at so many, because other people were commenting too, their church would just tell them to just start. Just open your mouth, just start talking. So here we are like speaking Harry Potter languages. Like, yeah. And it was so cringy. So it's so... You have so much pressure when you're in these environments to perform and to prove how holy you are, and how much you listen to the Holy Spirit. So, yeah. And going back to trying to find a man to lead you, I'm like, I'm very familiar with that whole idea.
And my sophomore year of college, that's when this whole thing happened with my teacher as well, was just a really bad time for me. There was this boy I really liked. We made out in his room, and I got kicked off of leadership at my church. They said they didn't trust me to lead discussions with underclassmen.
You're a danger to society, Mary Beth.
I know. And I remember specifically going to my roommate at the time who was not in the cult, and I was like crying, and I was like, me and this guy, we did this. And she was like, yeah, that people do that all the time. What are you talking about?
No, Bethel was the same way. And I was like, they're acting like, I don't even know that I'd been with hundreds of people. And I'm like, I went to second base with some guy, and it was the most like, we're terrible. We're such sinners. And the amount of shame, and it feels so serious. Like, I love that your roommate was like, this is not serious.
Yes. It was so funny to hear her say that, because when I said it to my other friends, she was like, if this man causes you to stumble, you can't be with him. Like, you can't even go near him. You shouldn't even be in his room ever talking to him again. But we did over the jeans stuff. Like...
Can I tell you about what one guy said? I don't know if I've ever shared it. I need to make a video on it because it's so cringe. There was this one guy that I met right before TED, and we kind of like dated for a few weeks, and we ended up kissing in his car. And when I tell you, it was like a 3-second, 10-second kiss. Like, this wasn't even like a makeout session. He literally broke up with me, or broke off our dating, because he said, my future wife wouldn't have kissed me before dating. And I was like, okay, thanks. God. I was like, you also kissed me?
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, okay, shame spiral.
But it's so true, though, that like men are allowed to do that in the church. They're allowed to say like, oh, my future wife wouldn't have let me do that. Yeah. But we don't get, like, if they did it to us, like, it's our fault. Yeah. That's at least
men are just that way.
Yep. And you should be the one. I remember when my husband, and this is a side tangent, but when my husband and I were dating, we were both very Christian. We are both have since like deconstructed together, thank God. But we waited until we were married, which was a whole journey. But there were times during that journey when I would like try to see what I could get him to do. And the only time I've ever seen this man cry was after we had crossed some line. And he was like, I just don't know what to do because they didn't tell me that my future wife would be like this.
That she would actually want to be with me.
Yeah, he was like, they told me I would be the problem, but I think it's you.
Oh my God.
No, it is me.
You're like, I'm sorry, you're really hot. This is very difficult for me.
I know. It's like, I'm sorry.
That is too funny.
Yeah.
Oh
we laugh about
the
it
way
all the
that
time
it's
now,
set up
but-
is just so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time, you're like actively trying to find somebody,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm sure, because that's how it is in all of these circles.
Yes, because I didn't want to be alone and I needed someone to lead me. And who better than my teacher? I remember where I was. I was at a hockey game when I got a text from this man, and he told me that he had like given his life to Jesus. And I remember this feeling of like, wow, Lord, what you have done. Amazing. Look, you've answered every prayer I've ever had. And I kind of like wanted to hear a little bit more about his story, and we were talking and somehow decided that we should get together when he's back home for Christmas. So we are both back home for Christmas and we go out to coffee together. And this is the turning point of the story. We talked at that coffee shop for hours. We talked about everything. We talked about he called it his, oh my God, it makes me cringe now. He called it his prodigal son story. Like he's the prodigal son who came
I'm
back
a
to
changed
Jesus.
man.
Yeah. Yep. We talked about marriage. I don't know why we talked about marriage, but we did at length, and what it should look like and what I was looking for in a partner. And at the end of this meeting, he said, I have a book for you, that I'd love to give you. Can you come out to my car and get it from me? And it was Crazy Love by Francis Chan. Mm-hmm. A classic.
I don't think I ever made my way through that. I think I read half of it.
I think I never finished it. I read part of it for him. And I remember I took it home and I opened my phone to a text from him that said, by the way, I think you should start calling me William. With like a winky face. And I was
Not
like,
a winky face.
yeah, I was like, oh my God, this is happening. And it did happen. For 3 months, this man texted me every day. We talked on the phone for hours into the night. He sent me emails that I have since rediscovered, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I used them all for the dialogue in my book because they were just like,
Yeah.
I had thought for years after this that I downplayed this. And then I pulled up those emails and I was like, I significantly underplayed it. Like I forgot just how much he was saying to me about, they were all under this cloud of Jesus.
Yeah.
And so all of it was like there was a sermon he sent me, connected to a verse, and it was all about like what we are doing the world might see as bad, but God has said it's okay. And it was connected to some story from the Bible, and it was very clear he was talking about us, like talking and, having a relationship. I have one where he sent me a sermon on Christian dating, love, and sex. And the message, the body of the message is like 3 full pages long. He talks about how he never had intimacy with his wife. And then he talked about love and dating. And the very last paragraph of this email was him saying, I want more than a friendship with you, Mary Beth. I want to like take you out to dinner. I want to get to know you, which now that fills me with rage because I'm like, you didn't know me. You're acting like you didn't know me. And we scheduled a date over Zoom, I think, or it wasn't Zoom at the time, Skype, I think. And that was the nature of all of our conversations. We had started to talk about, what will we tell people? When can I see you again? He said repeatedly in all of these conversations, I never saw you like this when you were my student. And I need you to understand that. I need you to know that. Which I obviously no longer believe. Not him ones saying where he that says, specifically.
That's so... Obviously, I think he's telling on himself. Like, he feels the need to justify it because he knows how bad it is. And the using of Bible verses that people won't understand, it's such spiritual manipulation.
Yes.
To try to justify it. Like, God, I feel like they always say this in the church. Whenever something really bad happens or they don't know how to explain something, it's God's way is not our way. And if God wants us to be together, the world may not like it, but it's what he always planned. And I think it's really easy to buy into it when you feel like you have this very rich history of, well, we've known each other so long and have, such a good friendship, and he finally accepted Jesus, so he's a changed man now.
Yep. Yes. And he had sent me a 3-page email in response to a sermon on love, sex, and marriage. Yeah.
Which is so appropriate. I mean, at this point, I guess appropriate is out of the window.
Yeah, we've already kind of given that up. And he tells me in this email, I didn't experience intimacy with my wife. He tells me his views on sex and that sex needs to be only between husband and wife. He tells me all of his ideas on dating. He tells me a whole bunch, just so much. But at the end of this, he says, I was not prepared for this between us, but it's exciting and I welcome it. Or he said, God will always surprise you. I wasn't prepared for this, but I'm excited. As if this was something that God had orchestrated.
Yes. Because he's already placing this entire situation in God's...
Yes.
God orchestrated this moment. We could have never foreseen it. I never thought this way about you when you were in 5th grade.
Yep. Who would have thought when you were an 11-year-old?
Where is this man's family? Do you think that they knew about this, or what was his game plan? Because I assume his friends would side-eye him so hard.
Right. What was he... And I'll never know this because I ended it before we had gotten to a point where we were telling people. I have no idea what his plan was. He had talked to his pastor about me, allegedly, and his pastor had cautioned him, but said as long as we were putting Christ first together and praying about it, then it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as you're not having sex before marriage, it's fine to date your students. So.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And so...
and he's almost grooming you in a way, maybe I'm taking it too far, but I feel like him sending you this email of saying, these are all of my expectations in a relationship. It's telling you to get in line with his perspective of what a marriage and relationship and intimacy and all of that looks like.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And we had talked about too, when we see each other, when you're home next over the summer, what boundaries are we going to put in place? Can we be alone together? I remember him saying, because I cringed at it at the time, that he was like, that would be you and me alone in a room would be a conundrum. That's the word he used.
Ew, what an ick. No, sorry. So I know I'm being such a hater on this man, but he just really upsets me.
No, it's okay. It's okay. He deserves it. And someone should, because I have a hard time getting there. I get there sometimes, but it's not a place that I live. And that's why I need other people and friends who hate this man so much.
Tell me, I need to hear it.
Yes. Yeah. I will call my friends sometimes and be like, can you tell me how much of a piece of wet lettuce this man is again, because I need to hear it.
Yeah.
But so sometime after that, I will show you because I have it right here. He writes me a letter
Shut up. Okay, so for those of you who can't see it, or if you're just listening, it's this little card and it says thinking of you, and it has, oh my gosh, which that's the name of your book, spoiler alert.
Yes,
guys.
it is.
And there's a heart around it. Wow. Did he draw that or
Yes,
did he
look
buy
at those
that?
little strokes.
Oh my gosh, guys, he hand drew this heart card. That's pretty crazy. You know what I'm going to be doing for Healdish is I'm going to take pictures of people's stuff and put it on the Healdish Instagram. So I will post a picture of the thinking of you card.
Great idea. Let's look at how long this is. Oh, it came in a book. This was a book, Messy Spirituality. Oh, shoot. No, that's fine. Its name's not on there.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Multiple pages.
Yeah. There's Bible verses on the back.
I'm like, what are we in 7th grade? This is literally very strange behavior.
What is funny is I got this letter from him and I read it, and I was going on a mission trip like the next week. I use that term very loosely. I was going on vacation to Panama City Beach.
No, I've been on 3 mission trips. 2 were actually pretty difficult, and I would say mission trips, but one was it was such a vacation.
No, this was the whole premise of this trip, by the way, was it's called Beach Reach, and the whole point was you go to Panama City Beach on college spring break, and you evangelize to the college students who are down there.
And we are not there to party. We are there to minister to the partiers.
No, I remember my husband was on this trip with me, and we laugh about it all the time because the night we got there, we drove the strip with all the bars, and we just sat in our cars praying over it. Like we were in the depths of hell. Like it felt so serious.
So serious.
And I just want to say, if you ran into me on the streets and I told you about Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. I was really deep in it.
I need to apologize to so many people.
So many people. We offered van rides to like the kids that were down there to get home to their hotels, and then like served pancakes in the morning. But then the rest of the time we just like played on the beach. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
But anyways, before I went on this trip, opened this card, and that was the first time I got this like uh-oh feeling. And somehow this is like, I started to put together, this is not okay. And this relationship is not going to be what I want ever. Like he will always be my teacher. When I saw him face to face, I had a hard time calling him by his first name. So I told him like, hey, this is starting to get really serious. And if we're going to tell people, I need us to like think about it very seriously. And so I had asked for a week of space when I was on this trip.
What was it about the card that kind of like shook you? Was there any of the words in it that made you feel that way? Or was it just the act of him giving you this little hand-drawn card?
I really think it was kind of both, but more so the hand-drawn. Something about like...
Did it just creep you out a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, because it feels intense.
Yes. Yeah. Very intense. Like, I think about how long this took him to like...
Yeah.
It just felt very intense. And so I told him I wanted a week to not talk to him, to not be clouded by it, and to pray about it at the beach. And on this trip, I happened to meet my now husband.
Thank God.
Seriously. We met, and I thought he was so cute. He played football at our school. He like approached me and we joked, and then we just found ourselves like drawn to each other. He was very funny, but he was my age. And that was really like, it's not like I knew when I met him that I met my future husband. I met him and I was like, if we started dating and we told my parents, that would be normal. And if like, I just kind of like put all of it into perspective. His name is the same first name as my teacher. So we'll call him William. And that felt like to me very like like God was like showing me this, because everything was spiritual to me at the time.
Yeah. Like you could have something normal, or you could have this very chaotic situation where you're probably going to get backlash and you're probably going to be explaining yourself for the rest of your life.
Yes. And I said in my book, it wasn't a competition, because I loved my teacher and I liked this boy. It was more this like, just everything was being put into perspective. So sometime on that trip, I made the decision that I did not want this relationship with my teacher. That was not me at that time deciding I never wanted to talk to him again. I just didn't want that relationship. So I was very naive to think that that could happen. I went home and I got with my friend and I was like, I don't know how to tell him this, because I felt such dread, because I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want him to be mad at me. I didn't want him to never talk to me again. This man was so important to me. And I knew what was at stake. I knew that like, if he never talks to me again, then I'm losing like the most important person from my childhood. And so my friend was like, I think you've been given an out, and I think you take it and you just tell him you met someone else and leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I scheduled a phone call with him, and I called him, and he was really upset, and he dumped something. Oh my God, this part is really hard for me to talk about.
Yeah.
He tells me that over the week while I was gone, he fell back into his struggle with pornography. And just like detailed so much about like when it started and how it played a role in his marriage falling apart. And
the truth.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
truth. Now we're understanding. Because I don't know. It's a lot of people have different opinions about it. I do believe whatever's best for the couple. That is how I feel. But I will say I know so many of my friends who have been impacted by a porn addiction in their relationships. And it is devastating for the woman. So for him to have painted her as this terrible monster their entire marriage.
Wow. And this is like, this is the part where I get really mad at him too, because I was 19 and I had no idea. I had no idea what he was telling me. I knew that in the church they talked about it. And so I thought it was like a very prevalent thing, because people in the church talk about this all the time, men specifically. And if you watch it once, you're addicted. That's what the church will tell you. And so I took this and I immediately felt like I cannot tell him right now. Like, he is so upset. He's struggling. If I tell him now, he's going to think it's because of this. And so I didn't tell him. And
I thought you had already told him that you didn't want to be with him. And then he said the porn thing. So you guys are just setting up this phone call and he says, while you were gone, I fell back. And so you don't want to reject him when you feel like he just had a very vulnerable, hard moment with you.
Yes. So we hang up. I'm like shaking and sobbing in my bed, because I'm like, I'm never going to get out of this. Like, I don't see how I'm going to take myself out of this, because I can't leave him like this. And sometime, call it God, call it the universe, call it whatever, he calls me back. And I answer the phone and he says, I'm so sorry. I dumped this on you and I didn't even ask about your trip. How are you? And it just flew from me. Like, it was like it came out and I wanted to shove it back in, but I couldn't. I just said, hey, I met someone and I don't think I want to pursue things with you. And he responded with a very odd question. He said, can I ask what this young man's name is so I can pray for him?
Ew.
And so I told him.
I told him. So mad.
And he laughed, because it's the same name. It's his name. And he said, that's funny. God's funny. And then he hung up, and I have never spoken to him again.
God is funny.
God
That's
is funny.
His interpretation of the situation.
Yeah.
Wow. And as if he really just wanted to know that. So I'm supposed to believe that this man has been praying for your husband
This whole time.
this whole time. That's why he wanted to know. It's always spiritual.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's so common in the church too, where they'll be like, I'll pray for you, or they'll gossip. Hey,
Yes.
you should pray for such and such. And, you
Yes.
know, it's kind of masking just curiosity.
Yep,
'Cause
exactly.
The truth is they just want to know.
Yep.
But, oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
when did you start to realize how messed up this whole thing was?
So initially I want to say years, but my husband was like, it wasn't years, because we started dating, me and my husband, and he remembers when I told him I was very nervous, and he was like, that was you recognizing that something was wrong.
Yeah.
And so when I told my husband, he was the first one to look at me and say, that man should be embarrassed. That man did something that he should not have done, and you did not do anything wrong. And I remember just like weeping when he said that to me.
Yeah.
Because it all felt, I thought for so, and now I'm going to get emotional, but I thought for so long that I had made this happen because I had a crush on him, and I willed it into like, I pushed and I pushed, and I initiated text messages, and I pushed boundaries. And I know better now. I know that it was his job. If he was who he was supposed to be, he should have held that line, and he should have discouraged me, and he should have, you know, done what he needed to do. Mm-hmm. He would never have like leaned back in. That's
Absolutely. Well, you don't bear responsibility for that at all. You know, I think it's easy to feel like, oh, well, I had a crush on him and I encouraged it because maybe I flirted. Okay, well, you were a minor. So, I mean, it's 100% his responsibility to discourage it. And any normal adult would have not acted in the way that he did.
Yeah. So I ended up in therapy like years later, probably like, this really was only like 4 or 5 years ago now, that I went to therapy and for anxiety. And I just said, I just had another one of my anxiety dreams where I'm back in high school and my choir director won't look at me. And she's like, oh, interesting. What was your relationship like with that teacher? And I was like, well,
let's talk about it.
Yeah. So we like started unpacking it, and she was the first person who ever like said, hey, that man groomed you. That was all of these memories that you have that are really positive memories of him. That was him grooming you. And I was so resistant. I was really, really resistant to accepting that for a very long time, because it meant that like, it really meant that most of my, like everything I'm proud of from high school, everything that I like worked really hard on didn't mean what I thought it meant. And this man who I told everyone is my favorite teacher. I wrote an essay about how he was the reason why I was becoming a teacher. To hear her call him a predator was like, I pushed back against it really, really hard. And so I did that bit of therapy, and I finally started to accept that for what it was. But really, what happened was this man, 8 years after the fact, so 2 years ago now, moved back to my state, and he took his old job back at my high school, which is like the town next door to where I live, where I teach now, where I direct. And so I found that to be, as you would expect, very triggering.
Absolutely.
And so I had to go back into therapy. And the dream started again, and it just like stirred up a whole bunch. But also for the first time, I felt angry, which was like a huge step for me. And I was just angry at like the audacity to come back here, to take your job back and expect that I'm still going to sit here and not tell anyone, because I've never told anyone this secret of his. And so that's when I started writing, and I wrote as like journaling, like I was writing letters to him that I would never send. And then eventually I took this letter and I started pulling lines from the letter, and each now each chapter of the book starts with a line from his letter, as kind of like an exercise to take my voice back, to take his voice and then tell my story. And then it kind of became something I started to share with people. And when I did, I received a lot of validation. And every time I let go of a piece of his secret and realized that, like, this is not my secret. It's not my job to keep this secret. I have felt so much lighter because it's like I gave up this thing that I've been carrying for him for so long. And I think that's given, like, the most perspective I've gotten is from reading it back as if I'm, like, looking at it from above. I was able to see things that I hadn't connected before. I have a friend who was like, I want you to read this story, and I want you to read it as if it's about your daughter, and think if you still want to protect him after that. And that was like a switch that flipped. So it's the healing process has been like a very long journey, and I don't feel like I'm done. I don't feel like I ever will be over this, because it's just, I think it's something that will always ebb and flow. But I find a lot of peace being able to talk about it and to share it and to connect with other people who went through very similar things.
Absolutely.
And something else too that I'll say is, because my story it was all an emotional relationship, and this man never touched me, I thought nothing happened. Nobody wants to hear this. No one cares about this. You were 19 and he told you he wanted to be more than friends with you. Like, get over it, essentially. And that's what I would tell myself. And sometimes I would find myself like wishing that he had done something more pronounced, so I had anything to like
cling
to someone
or like
cling to.
validation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or say like, I know it was wrong because he did this. But this always felt so gray and so muddy. And so, like, did I make it up? Was I reading into things that I shouldn't have been reading into? And I found, since I even started posting about this like a month ago, there are so many people who have gone through the same thing and are dealing with those same thoughts that I am. And that is so validating to hear.
Yeah. And I think that that's the important part of sharing stories, because I think that there are so many people who have been through strange things, and you don't know what you went through until you start talking about it. Like, okay, tangent time, but
yes.
Well, I have two tangents.
Great.
Because I actually, my crazy lore, I had a choir director who actually had he was in his 60s, had a relationship with a 17-year-old at our school, and he was my favorite choir director. And I thought our choir was our family. I remember we went on a trip to Dallas, and I sat next to him on the train the entire way. I used to consider him to be like a dad figure in my life. And we were all just so close. The choir was family. And I remember I came back from Christmas break and everybody was like, oh, he's gone because he was having a relationship with this girl and they were going to launch an investigation. So he just quit. And me and my friend, we were so traumatized by this, feeling like we couldn't trust men anymore because I had been abused as a kid. So here I was thinking like, my judgment is so off. Like, I guess I don't know who's safe. I don't know who's a creep. And we ended up quitting choir halfway through the year, and we switched to take mythology, which was so random, but because we just didn't want any part of it anymore. You know, I felt grossed out by choir. But as far as grooming, like, I think the hard thing about grooming is that while you're in it, it feels like friendship. It feels like love. It feels like affection. So I think grooming is a really hard thing to heal from, because often you feel like, well, what was so traumatizing about it? Or you're afraid that people would say, well, what was so traumatizing about it? Like, they didn't attack you. They didn't assault you. You were, quote unquote, having fun at the time, or you didn't realize that this was wrong. And I had a situation, I know I've shared this story on social media before. I don't know if you saw this, but my maid of honor stole from me on my wedding day.
Wait. This is actually how I saw you first. Now that
No
you say
way.
that, I saw that like a long time ago, I think, right? Yes. I remember this.
Oh my gosh. It was, and there's so much more, guys. At some point, once some legal stuff is done, I really want to do like a 5-part series on Healed-ish to like explain more, because this was the most insane situation. But basically, I became friends with her when I was 12 and she was 19. And I don't know, I just thought, I'm really mature for my age. We're really close. And she used to show up at my middle school and bring me flowers. She would say that she was my Valentine. She made me feel so special. Like, we used to go on extravagant like picnic dates, and she would just say like, I know you're being bullied in school, and I just want you to feel so important. I just want you to know how like wonderful you are. And I thought, we are just having this very platonic, obviously, I'm not thinking anything like that.
Yeah.
And I ended up talking with my sisters this past year, and I'm crying to them about everything that went on with her. I call her Crystal. And I started to name some of these inappropriate behaviors, because I started to realize that she had some narcissistic type of tendencies through all of the financial stuff I found out. And one thing I started to realize was that there was so many inappropriate boundaries. So we used to take baths together when I was like 15 years old. Like, we would keep our underwear on, but that was it.
Yeah.
And she told me like, hey, we have to be quiet. Family members don't like it that we take baths together, because they just don't understand. They're weird like that, you know, and it's kind of like this us versus them thing.
Yeah.
She used to ask me to put my hand on her breast when she was anxious, because she said, I have anxiety and it helps calm me down. And when we would be like walking downtown, I remember one time she like put her hand in my pocket, and I was like 13, and I jumped, and I said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm teaching you. She said, I'm desensitizing you so that if people touch you, you don't jump. Like, she actually said that sentence.
Okay.
And at the time, I just feel like we're friends.
Yeah.
Like, we're like, I don't know. Like, so going back to what you're saying, as far as like, you almost wish that he had done something that way you could like put a finger on it. I feel like when I look back on my friendship with Crystal, I'm like, well, nothing further ever happened.
Right.
Looking back, was it inappropriate that she gave me lap dances when I'm 13? Yes. Because she was 20, and turns out I found out she was having other inappropriate relationships with other people too. So I know that I'm not crazy, but it didn't feel like abuse or harm at the time. It feels like friendship. It feels like this person really cares about me. And when you're saying how much it has affected you, because you've known him forever, like you knew him since 5th grade. So he is so woven into so many good memories. I feel so similar about Crystal, because I felt this grief of, well, she was at my bachelorette, and like we used to hold hands as we would fall asleep, and we would cry, and we would say we're best friends. And it feels like all of these memories that felt really innocent and sweet are kind of tainted after you gain perspective. So it's hard, because you're not healing from just one thing. You're healing from years of memories.
Yes. And and he was woven into like my passion and my development of like of music and singing. And there were so many years that I just didn't sing. And not until I started to like uncover this, because I'd noticed that when I sing, I'd be like, oh, I wonder if he heard me, would he be proud of how far my voice has come? Or would he, what would he say about like hitting this note? How should I do it? And that was like, that has been really, really hard to deal with. Or like, I can't listen to my favorite musical because he's the one that showed it to me. And it's just hard to pull that apart. And so, do I love this because I loved him, or do I love it because I love it too?
Yeah. Looking back, so once you step back and look back at the entire situation, like, what do you wish people in your life had done or the school had done, or what red flags do you think people should look for when it comes to mentorship type relationships? Because I think when it comes to band and coaches, and especially that sector where it's not just math and stuff, I feel like they get away with more.
Yes, for sure.
So what do you think some red flags are that people should look out for?
So like one of the biggest, and definitely would be him teaching me the definition of those different sexual terms and joking along with us. I think that all of that should have been reported, because I'm now a director and I work with high schoolers, and they say crazy things all the time.
Yeah.
And they don't know what words mean, and they will ask you things that you shouldn't answer. And the proper response is you should go and talk to your parents about that. Yeah. Because it's not your responsibility to jump in and teach them everything. And there are lines and boundaries that you need to have. So that, I think, if you notice someone talking about, like, you know, this person teaching XYZ, or another example is, like, I had a friend who told me, yeah, my daughter eats lunch with her male teacher every day. He's so nice. She has nowhere to sit. I was like, nope, you need to say something about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Those are like things that we think look like a positive relationship. When they start to get close like that, like the one-on-one, eating lunch every day, the first person I tell when I have a breakup is my teacher. Those are things to notice and to clock, and they're not always bad. But I would rather that people err on the side of caution than to let them build on each other. Because I think that what happened to me is that nobody saw all of it. Everyone saw pieces, and everyone thought that, like, that maybe that's it. Like, this is just, like, he has poor boundaries with his students and whatever. Or he joined our church. That's kind of weird, but whatever. But the part that is tricky and that I haven't, like, come to is, what do you do with that? Because we can't report every teacher who has lunch with their students every now and then. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think it's really tricky to figure out where the line is, but I do think even just telling the school, like, hey, I noticed that my child has this teacher's phone number, or, you know, if someone is in your life so often, I feel we have to be more cautious. And I also would say to other people like me, if it happens, if we can get to a point where we tell people and share it, that would be really, really helpful. It took me 10 years to talk about this, and now I have nowhere to report it because he's not teaching. So I can't, like, call his district and be like, hey, he did this. And he never crossed a physical line. So I feel like I have nothing. But also, someone who's capable of doing this should not be teaching.
Yeah. And opinion. Also going back to, he was like, she looks a little old, don't you think? I mean,
yeah.
It's not just the red flag of poor boundaries. He has made comments about young girls.
Yes.
And that's not who you want around your children.
No. And sure. I think, like, even if you're like, I don't have anything that's going to, like, they can do anything with, but they can remember, and they can log it, and they can be more mindful, and they can, you know, watch for it to continue. Even because, yeah, I would say one thing I wanted to add is just, in general, huge age gap friendships. I also know, I don't want to out who they are, but I do know somebody, and he's in his 60s, and he used to have this friend who he said she was like a daughter figure, and they would go out to coffee all the time, same age as his daughter, and they would hold hands. And it was so weird, and he was a pastor. It was just very strange. Don't like it.
And, you know, she ended up breaking off that friendship because she felt away. And I just think this whole mentorship thing, especially from the opposite sex, I mean, obviously it can happen same sex too, but red flags of, I think if anybody listening is young, because I actually do get a lot of people write me who are in high school. I'm like, how did you find me? But hello, I'm glad you're here. But one thing is, I think it's really easy to think that you're so much older than you are. And one thing that I've said before is, it's not that I'm saying you're not mature enough. I'm saying that they're not mature enough.
Yes.
Based on the fact that they're even interested in you.
Yes.
And it has to do with, they should not even be thinking about that. It's not, oh, you're so young, you're stupid, like, no, there's something wrong. Take it from people who are around 30. It's not normal to want to hang out with somebody who's a teenager.
And that's something too, that it's so hard, because I understand when you're that age and someone is telling you you're mature for your age, you don't fit in with your peers because, you're not into the same things as them. You start to think that, like, well, I probably would fit in better with my teacher or someone older. And it's hard to accept your youth. But I hate the phrase age is just a number. I hate it so much. Yeah. And also to say, like, you're mature for your age. I think we should stop saying that, because maturity is holistic, and what you might be more responsible, you might be more, into different things, but you are still a child. And I wish I could look at like a younger me and say that to her and say, your youth is not a problem. It's not a bad thing. It's not something you need to get rid of. You can act your age, and that is okay. And and you shouldn't, and power dynamics, you don't understand it when you're in there, but like, I now have to sort out so much because of that dynamic, because I was groomed underneath somebody. I'm 29 years old. It happened 10 plus years ago. And I still have to keep myself from protecting him, or I still feel anxious about talking about it, because the power has been imbalanced forever. And you can't,
it feels like, do I even have a right to say that? Because it feels like he's up here, but he's not, you know? And when I was with my ex, he was 10 years older than me, which, you know, looking back now. And I think if anybody's in an age gap relationship, I think it depends on what age you got together, you know, like say you're 40 and 50, I think, whatever, but I mean, 20 and 30 was crazy. And one thing that he would always say when we were married was like, this is how marriage is, and you just don't understand because you're so young, which I feel like is similar to what he was saying. Like, this is my idea of marriage. He sends you a freaking email saying like, I'm telling you how marriage is supposed to be. And like, he's an authoritarian in your life, but also you're kind of dating him. So the power imbalance there. But my ex, he used to be like, well, you just don't understand. You're so young. And I used to tell him, well, then why did you marry someone young? I was like, well, then why did you marry me? I mean, if I'm so young and I can't understand anything, but I was young, you know? But side eye when it comes to those huge power imbalances, for sure. Yes. Do you want to tell everybody about your book?
Sure. So the book is called Thinking of You, and it is currently with publishers. It will be out sometime this summer. I am not sure when. I don't have a date yet, unfortunately, to give you. But you can follow me on social media. My name is just my name, Mary Beth Renault. But on TikTok, it has periods between the name. And that's important to know, because you'll end up on my personal page, which is just fluff. So if you want to know more about the book and the story, you got to put the periods in there.
Yes, I will tag you too. Okay, great. I can put a link to your profile on the show notes for everybody to find you. Yes. Oh, that's so exciting. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Writing a book. Is this your first book?
Yes, this is my first book. I have always
Give me
loved
tips.
writing.
I'm trying to write a book.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, how did you get published?
So my first tip for anyone who wants to write their story is just write. Just write it all. Yeah. Just get it out. I would sit there and like critique something, and I had a friend who was like, no, you just write. Yeah. And like the whole thing, it just poured out of me. And then I went back and I organized it and I made it cohesive. And finding a publisher is really hard. I queried the book for a while, and I just never got an agent. So I'm going through a hybrid publisher right now, actually. And that was connections. I just knew someone who was a published author who read the book and then shared the book with the publisher, and then the publisher liked it and they called me, and that's kind of how it transpired. But
that's so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. Well, we'll definitely put all of your information so that people can find you. And just thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's such the perfect mix of spiritual manipulation and power imbalances. And you don't know what you're going through until you're out of it. I think so often it's very confusing when you're in the midst of processing all of those things. And I love what you said about, I mean, it's realistic to say, I don't know that I'll ever fully be healed of like all of those like little triggers or like those little things in the back of your mind. And I think so many of us want to think that, like, not saying that you can't be healed, but that's kind of why I got the name Healedish, is I'm like, do I feel healed and that I've built another life and I'm thankful for this life, but do I still also have triggers? Do these things still like affect me? Of course, because we're human and these things live on with us. So yeah, just thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for giving me a place to tell my story. I appreciate it so much.
Awesome. And that's it for this episode of Healedish. It's conversations like this that remind me why I wanted to start this podcast in the first place, to create a safe place where survivors can talk about the hard things without shame. If this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a quick review. You have no idea how much your reviews mean to me. And as always, thank you for being a part of this community. We may not have it all figured out, but we are healing loudly, messily together. I'll see you next week.